All right, so I'm really excited about this conversation. I'm joined today by Dana, Shakiyla, and Valerie. And so, how are each of you doing, first of all?
Doing great. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, grateful for the invitation to be with you three this morning.
I just find myself smiling from the inside out to be with the three of you.
Great.
Yeah, I'm. Me too. And we are together because of there has been, kind of in the field recently, discussions on adult development theory, and some people have been on the critical end of that, people like Dave Snowden, and I think it's kind of created a very interesting series of conversations that I've seen, and that's why we're here today. And each of you has had an intimate and kind of long experience with adult development theory in your own right. And I think what we're going to do today is explore, like, how has your own relationship with this theory evolved over time? How are you kind of holding this theory right now? Where might you feel you still love this theory and it's brilliant and it has so much to offer? Where might you be questioning how people have held, or you have held, this theory? And I have a feeling that this conversation, is going to be like what I would call like a living conversation. Yeah, we're probably going to be sharing our own personal experiences. And I actually would like to begin by asking, how did you all meet, actually? Like, first of all, because you three are here, but why are you three here? Why not two, a different constellation?
That's great.
And that's such a profound question. Why are we three here? Dana, why don't you take that one? Why don't you talk about our origin story?
Well, we're all friends of Bill Torbert, and we met 12 years ago at least. And Shakiyla and I met at one of Bill's birthday parties in Boston, and Val, I think we met in a what do we call it? Some gathering, and we have been so that we were saying this before the call, that the theme of this community and I think the theme of, or some of the themes of our relationship have been friendship, inquiry, we've been developmental friends, and developmental inquiry, friendship, play, and intimacy. And I've probably had monthly calls with both Shakiyla and Val for the last decade. And then they've had their own regular relationship too. So actually, to bring the three of us together around something that we really care about. And then Joel, we've developed a friendship too. So I feel like we've got four friends who are passionately interested in something here together exploring. I'm so excited about it. So what did I leave out, Valerie or Shakiyla?
Yeah, I think what I want to add to that, just to kind of put a little bit more meat on the bones, is we are friends of Bill's, but I think we became friends of Bill's because we were interested in developmental theory, and there was something about his presentation of that, his unpacking of it, his depiction of that drew us in. And I think on top of that, Bill just makes himself so available to folks who want to probe his theory, and him, and I know when I first met Bill, I gave him such a hard time about the changing names and why can't we be consistent? It's so hard to track this, but just of being drawn to this theoretical idea and then being invited into the space of practice, really living into this idea of development and action and inquiry, which is another one of Bill's frameworks. And how can we actually be in that space together in the here and now, and then how can we take that more broadly into the world. So our community is an opportunity to do that. And then within the community, I know with both of you, there was just an energetic draw, and being in a community where you pay attention to that. Who are you drawn to explore with further without any particular agenda other than just being in the emergence of your relationship and coming to know self and other?
Mhm. Yeah, I love that you bring that up, because I think I met both of you at the same time. At that first, it was Bill's birthday party, but y'all had just come from an alchemist or a work party with the community, and I hadn't yet been part of the community. But I do remember this distinctly, and Dana and I've talked about it before, that there was this kind of like recognition and eros or interest when we first saw each other, and we were like, oh, who are you, dear person? And that's how the conversation started. And then I remember you, Val, I think you had on this bright, like stunning red dress or something, and I just couldn't stop staring at you, I remember. So
Oh, you go on.
yeah, there was like there really was this like draw, and I bring that up because I feel like one of the values or principles that I've been holding and thinking about in my work, and oddly enough, me and Dana's wife, Hillary Bradbury, have written about this, is this erotic energy that we have in our relationships. And I think in our non-romantic relationships, right, that there is this surging towards each other that I think fuels development and also makes it playful and joyful in some ways. And so I pay attention to when I have, like for me, it's really important to have eros in my, even in my collaborative relationships. And so these relationships have a lot of eros in them. And it started, I think, from the beginning. So I love that Val brings that up.
Yeah, and our journeys, just one last thing, Joel. Val wrote a book on fallback, and it wasn't just a theoretical book. We accompanied each other through some shit together. All of health issues, fallback, this whole discovering about development in the midst of volatility, uncertainty, ill health, all kinds of COVID, all kinds of things has been quite profound. And so I think we have some tread on our tires together here. We have some lived experience that we can speak from.
Yeah, I think I want to come back to that, the fallback, and I just want to pick up actually what you just shared there, Shakiyla. So it changed the question I was going to ask next, because you mentioned eros and erotic energy. I love that, and it does speak to me deeply about how there's a kind of evolution that can occur, and that can perhaps be a kind of, principle, or one of them at the heart of that. And I wonder if you could speak to that a bit more, and that's for all of you too, and just to set a bit more context to that, because maybe, as we talk about these theories, perhaps like one of the critiques that has been put out there, and perhaps even as a critique of modernity of our times, is that we can perhaps hold these theories in a mechanical way, overly simplistic, even imposing them upon experience. And actually, I've already heard all three of you start to talk about, that, oh no, we met in this space of practice, and it was about action inquiry in the moment together, in intimacy together. And there's this eros, and that has a very different kind of palpable feel to me that I think speaks to something important. So I guess, could you say maybe a bit more about eros, and why that's been so important to you, to all three of you? Yeah.
Yeah. I love talking about Eros. And again, it's really been and particularly outside of romantic or the sexualized notion of it. And it's become really, really an important principle for the way I think about my work, because in the world or as a practitioner, and I think it has supported how we've worked together, because all of us have done, like, we're close friends, very intimate friends, and we've done work together, you know, in the world in terms of our professional work. And so it is this kind of, but the Eros is the part, I mean, we deeply respect each other, but the Eros is the part that I think that holds it together, and that I would say is the power of it as well. A few years ago, Val and I and another close friend of ours too, as part of this community, did an offering for a community that was around our inquiry that we were in. And people loved the offering, but the thing that that we got a lot of feedback about was the Eros between us.
Mm-hmm.
That people were, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like they found it very illuminating in terms of inspiring around their own experience, and an invitation into their own experience in a way that wasn't just academic or cerebral in that way. And the sense that I make it at is one of the things that I've come to is that you can't develop on your own. Like, our being and becoming is so intimately intertwined with relationship and community. We actually need each other to grow and develop. And if that's the case, I think the friendship, which Bill has been such a big proponent of, these intentional communities of development, is so important. And not just friendship like, oh, I like you, and you know what I mean, and you're cute, like what it means to be a friend to somebody, like positive regard, Eros, right, that we have in our community that sustains, I think, the hard work of development. So that's sort of, I mean, that's one way into it for me. And it's not academic at all, or conceptual rather. It really is this like deep surging towards the other.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, I love the way you did that, like a deep surging towards the other is just such a beautiful way of framing that. And it feels real to me. And I think in Joel's question, I'm kind of looking at the cerebral aspect that brought us all together, you know, this theory that was the basis for our, you know, inquiry, I think, into self, which maybe doesn't always happen, right? Maybe we just think this is a theory here that I like, I'm going to apply that to you. But it was an invitation to inquiry in ourselves. And we were so fortunate to have come together to be in a space of play and exploration of how do we be in inquiry with each other. And so for me, in my work in this particular offering that Shakiyla mentioned, I think what is so powerful to people is not hearing about the theory or even about hearing about me and the theory, but like that relational space, because in this particular offering, Shakiyla and our friend Aliki Nicolaides and we had decided we were going to bring this offering to a community, and the prerequisite for that was that we had to be in relationship with each other, working through the thing that we were going to discuss, that we were going to offer, for a year at least in advance. So we said, we're not just going to go out and talk about this out there. We are going to live into it. And then we're going to bring that to this, this community. And so when we did make this offering, we entered a lot of the framing for it and the groundbreaking or ground setting for it was our sharing how we had entered into this space with each other. And I think that that's where people were able to really connect to this surging toward each other, this love toward each other, and it created a container for people to enter into that space themselves.
Yeah, it was very intimate, like, because we had been meeting monthly, but then we were also writing back and forth to each other, kind of similar to the, some writing that we shared with you with this trio of folks too, just about our own experience. And so we shared that in the presentation, the intimacy of the writings back and forth. And it was, yes, almost like you kind of almost, should I be listening to this? Should I be here while you all are expressing these like very deep intimacies with each other? And it created a whole space. Like, we didn't start off with the theory, we started off with the sharing, and it just changed the relational field, I felt like.
And I want to say too, that in that process, we shed and we grew and we shed some more. And, we dipped into the deepest corners of ourselves. And, it was in that relationship, in that relational space, in the practices that we undertook together, but in the safety of this kind of love for each other that allowed that to happen. And I think that love for each other infused that space of learning and self-discovery with others.
Yeah, there's something about that love, that again for me, and that being in the relational space and working with the material, living into it, that again I think speaks to perhaps some of the criticisms, but at least my own journey around this work as well, where how can it move from being something where we talk about it on an abstract level and actually like move into a living space with it, where we've worked with it in our very being, and then we can actually speak from a place of wisdom, about this topic, of experience, and that love is an important container for that to take place, for us to be able to open and be vulnerable and be intimate in that way. And maybe I want to because we could talk about this a lot, but I want to ask this question early on in our time together, which is like, could you speak to how your relationship with this theory has changed over the years, and particularly focusing on like more recently, you might start with like how I used to hold it, but like, what are you grappling with right now as well? What are you working with or grappling with, or how do you hold it? Yeah, Dana, do you want to kick us off with that maybe?
I don't. I want to allow that to sink in first.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, if Shakiyla and Valerie don't want to, I will.
I do have a thought, and it's funny. It also connects to what you were just talking about, Joel, this whole critique of the mechanistic nature of the theory. And I'll invite Dana to say something about that too, because what I was going to offer, it came to my mind, made me think of you, Dana, and my experience of you. I mean, I think, when I was first learning about it, I was enthralled with it, of course, and then you just take it in and read and suck it up. And I think this is the first level of learning something, is that you just take it wholesale, right? That's part of it. And because you can't really critique a theory until you fully understand a theory, is what I believe. And so, I played with it and did things with it. And I think I still have a lot of respect for the theory, because I think it does offer a way to understand ourself and others in our being and becoming, right? Like, it really, I think we don't appreciate what a novel theory it is that adults continue to develop in adulthood, right? Like earlier, we
Yeah.
just thought you turn 18 and then that's it. Like your brain is developed. So, I mean, it really is an innovation in human understanding of ourselves, if you think about it that way, and not even just in a develop, like, oh, we all know that we change and grow, but like the way that our brains work and the way that we understand the world is continuing to develop into adulthood. So for me, it really helped me have a lot of compassion for people, you know, that they weren't just being stupid or hard or difficult, just right. Like this is what we tell ourselves about people when they're not doing what we want them to do or showing up. And so it helped me have a lot of compassion, but in my work now, it has helped me really design or think about how to design interventions, if you will, for systems and for the ways that I approach my facilitations and stuff. But the thing that I was going to say is, as you become more nuanced in your understanding, you realize that it's a tool, right? Like any framework or theory is just a tool to use. And what I probably suspect is that some of the folks, not, I mean, the critiques are well-founded, like I have critiques about it too, but I think sometimes it comes from a space of not living into the theory and making it your own and keeping it at an arm's distance in some ways. And that's not the role of the theory. It's not the theory's job to tell you how to apply it. The practitioner is the one that's supposed to live into the framework, right? Like you use frameworks as a liberating structure. And it's the same with the theory. And where I was going to reference you, Dana, is I feel like I just watch you in your practice and how you use the theory, and you've really been a master and a teacher for me in how you apply the theory as a tool or as a liberating framework. And so I'm curious you use other tools like this too, right? Like your integral work, the other, like the trauma work, all these different ways that you kind of embody them and then play with them and intertwine them. So I would be curious to hear you talk about, you know, your relationship to that and how you do it in your work.
It's an edge for me, particularly around this question, to not start mansplaining.
Okay.
So let me see if I can answer the question more essentially or speak to it. I have this client who, before we became a client, he's a CEO of a healthcare organization, really interesting man. And he said to me, whenever I've hired consultants, they have a framework that they look at me and they look at our situation through, and then everything becomes a hammer looking for a nail. Right. And I just lit up when he said that, because in a certain way, he encapsulated what we do with any new theory or approach that we become enthralled with. And, you know, for years, I really am speaking with the voice of a practitioner, and both my own first person experience in relationship with others, but then also as a coach and a consultant, and have been involved in many different experiments. And I think I have some good stories to tell, but I think the thing I want to say is what I love is to let it all go, and as much as possible to be able to be in a subtle inquiry about my own cognitive bias and other kinds of biases, and meet that person where they are in the language that they're speaking. And if I trust that if there's a tool or a distinction or to bring the theory out, because that will illuminate something, or that's where there's energy, and it keeps coming back. Usually if it knocks 3 times, then I'll invite the conversation. And when I trust that, it really tends to land. It tends to become something that the client is pulling out of me rather than a frame that I'm leading with. And of course, to the degree that I think that this particular theory lives inside of us in a healthy way, it's allowing in the moment to me to make skillful discernments. There's more wisdom, hopefully, and more compassion and more understanding, more capacity to meet people where they are. So, early in my career, it was from a consultant perspective, and I think this was maybe the first stage in vertical development, is we live in a VUCA world, grow your complexity. You need to grow your complexity. I remember I did a day thing on, become we called it strategist in Torbert's thing,
Mm-hmm.
We need to grow to meet and you know what, that's partially true. It's also quite a little manipulative, and it's only part of the story. It's just a small part of the story is the ascending path. And I think what we've all been living and discovering together is the descending path and the nuance of that together in relationship. It's been quite humbling. And I, as a guide, as a coach, as a guide, it's very hard to bring people or to be with people to places you haven't been before, or at least you're not engaged yourself in it. And I say this having watched Stutz last night on Netflix, which I recommend.
What?
To all of you, Stutz.
Oh,
It's a very much an intimate engagement with the patient and their therapist, and very vulnerable, very, very beautiful. Anyway.
We also do that. We share movies
Netflix
with each other.
Yeah, I saw part of that one. He's an interesting Phil Stutz. He's a really cool guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to add, Valerie?
Sure. I'm with Shakiyla on this. When I encountered the theory, I was enthralled, and I could, it brought me a lot of comfort to see myself, my developmental journey that had come before, and then what possibly laid in front of me. And but when I read the theory, and this is part of coming to know a theory too, I couldn't find the part in the theory that was my lived experience of not showing up with my full capacities all the time. And I wondered, am I an anomaly? Am I the only one who's falling back to this more constricted way of making meaning of the world and acting and feeling and all of that? And so I did early on see kind of a chink in the armor of the theory. But when I set out to do my research on fallback, I really wanted to tidy up the kind of frayed edges of the theory and put a bow on it. That was my orientation. This doesn't make sense. I'm going to find out something about this, and I'm going to clean it up. And then we're going to have this complete theory that we can move forward with, and it's going to be sweetness and light. And in the course of my research, there was a much more unraveling that happened than cleaning up. I ended up having many more questions than I did answers. And I think that what allowed me to let the theory fall off the pedestal, but also to be there to kind of catch it, and to hold it lovingly, was that I was in conversation with other people who loved this theory, who knew it, who walked around within it, and tried it on and knew where it felt constricting and where it just didn't seem to match. And that they could be in the discovery with me about what didn't fit. So you could love it and also not, fully buy into it, not like walk out with the whole store of clothes. but just really sink into that space. And then as I continued to do my research, because then I was like, okay, well, there is this fallback thing. So this exists in our development. We don't always show up with our full capacities. And we don't like what that's like when we're smaller. And so let's lock that backstage. Let's get rid of those parts of self. And in my ongoing research with people and practice with people, I came to realize that is not the answer. We do not ever get rid of those parts of self. And we really don't want to, because they are part of who we are. They're not going to go away. And they contain so much valuable information and wisdom and gifts if we just take the time to befriend them and the courage to befriend those parts of self. And so my thinking has really changed over time. And I, in this more recent conversation that Dana and Shakiyla and I have had, and voice, but in writing, I'm regularly reminded, because a part of falling back, I think, can be growing. And then a part of falling back that is also the benefit, the gift, is just sinking into those spaces and wrapping them up in your arms and holding them and letting them hold you back. And even if that's it, even if we don't actually propel to something greater, that's okay too. And holding that tension of this desire to use falling back as a springboard, that we then spring forward. Like I remember in something that Shakiyla wrote, she was like, maybe it's just being in the mess of it. Maybe we, shouldn't be in this focused on going forward. And there's a part of me that feels like, yes, absolutely. Amen, sister. And then there's a part of me that says, but I want, there is hope in this work. And there is, I want to introduce people to a practice that allows them to access that hope and not just the pushing away. So I think that's the edge for me right now in the theory. Like, I see the challenges inherent in the theories. I love what Shakiyla said about it's easy to criticize from outside when you're not really living in it. And I find that, in this space, I can be like, oh, how does that sit with me when Shakiyla and Dana bring this up? Because I know they love the theory and I know they live into the theory. And if they're asking these questions, they're valid questions for me to really sink into and explore myself. So all of that allows me to be in this space of discovery about what is my lived experience, what is my experience accompanying others, what is this about? And to not think that what we know now is what we're going to know tomorrow or the next day or the next day. Like, we are in such a space of discovery here. And it's exciting to be holding the theory with love at the same time we're massaging into, what else it could be. And also letting go of the things that it's not that we thought it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's so much, Shakiyla, you wanted to maybe jump in?
Yeah, no, I think that's the part that I'm living into and that we've all been talking about in our conversations that was coming up. Just like, growth and becoming is just messy. It's messy and it's uneven. And so I think that's the part I think that's the part for me that the theory didn't talk enough about. Like, I wanted more sort of like guidance around that. Although I don't think that it was intentional, because if you go back and read some of Keegan's work, the way that he presents it, he talks a lot about accepting, like, that there's not anything inherently wrong with any of the stages, actually, right? And in fact, one stage could be a coup for the child or the adult that has reached that stage. It's really about a match between what you need and what you have, essentially, right? That's the way to think about it. And so I do feel like one of the things that I've been trying to work with, and again, the reference Dana was offering this too, that we bring our own like fears and like things onto the theory and desires. I think you had written that in our interchange, and I was like, oh yeah, that's true, right? And so there was always, I think this achiever like way that we approached the theory is some of like what we're bringing to it as well. It's hard to discern anymore what's the actual theory, and what is the stuff that we interpret and bring into the theory around it. And so yeah, like I think there's a way for me where I've always wanted to be better and bigger, right? That I just want to have as much complexity as I can. And I don't know that does that equate with goodness? I don't know, it doesn't. And to Val's point, I found this out in my research too, that some of the people that I was working with had more capacity than what they were actually able to live into in their lives, right? So it was like your developmental complexity didn't necessarily match behavioral alignment, if you will, you know. So like, oh, and it's different than fallback, right? Like fallback is a particular phenomenon. This is just like, oh, I could be at a, like technically on paper at a more complex stage or have more capacity, but if I'm in my trauma or if I'm in a particular context that is super hard for me, it may not even matter in terms of how I show up with people or in my life. And so again, like Val was saying, it's all of these little moments where the theory, where you notice, oh, like the theory is not going to solve or fix us as humans, right? Like what is our desire to have things be fixed or simple or easy? And I think now, because I'm in my own moment of, you know, discombobulation that we talked about and loss of ground, there's a part of me that's really questioning, as I had written, questioning the limits of agency and intervention, right? That we can fix things in ourselves and work on it. And it's not hopeless. I love that you brought up hope, Val. It's true. It's not like pessimism or hopelessness. It's just being with things as they are in some ways. Like, and I think I'm going back to my Buddhist roots now. It's like things as they are, reality as it is. And I personally find it comforting, because I don't have to be anything other than what I am in any given moment, you know? So.
I could just add a reflection, and then Dana, I'm very curious. There's so much in what you're saying, all of you, and so let me see how this comes out. But I wonder if what some of your sharing is pointing to a shift we might be going through collectively, even about some of these deep notions, you know, that we may have inherited from certain worldviews, like, going forwards, you know, being better and bigger, and how that will lead me to a place where I'm better and maybe I'm, you know, less vulnerable. Things don't impact me as much, and I'm not messy, you know. So like we kind of, messy is bad, you know, but actually I'm hearing you share how there's a descent, you know, and I think we should just define what we mean by the term fallback as well, when you can, Valerie. So, but there's a descent, which is also important, and there's something there's something organic in this process, and perhaps we're coming up against the limits of how we can apply a certain again, I don't know if it's mechanical or like worldview onto something which is actually much more organic, and like a question I'm hearing you both ask is, or all of us ask, is like, can we strategically make growth happen, or is there a different mode of being which allows growth to unfold, you know, which is perhaps you know, you said being where I am, you know, there's something for me fundamental about being where I am, embracing what's here, that can actually create a kind of unfolding, which is actually beyond what I could ever fathom. This is where it just gets into grace, perhaps, but it's like there's an arrogance in my own, there was an arrogance in my own developmental kind of how I thought I could make development happen, how I thought I could help others develop. But if I actually just embrace and what's here, which is, there's a real art to that, because we're always interfering or resisting or rejecting. But then there would be an innate unfolding taking place, which had a life, an eros inside of it. Basically, there was eros inside of that felt palpably different. So, and I wonder if this, again, I'll add in, some people have said, is this stage like, is that too simplistic to hold it like that? That one stage just emerges after another, hey, it's very easy. I'm just piling a few things in here, putting you on the spot, Dana, wherever you take us next. But I do want to hear from you too. And it's so easy to subtly, even though we say it, like it's like the less mature, in invert commas, less mature is worse, and then other people now pointing to how like there's incredible wisdom in each of these worldviews or stages that we've missed through the way we perceive things. So I'm not sure if there's a question in there, but I'll just see where Dana, you might want to speak, or anyone. So
I think what would help is if Val spoke to what fallback, her definition of fallback. I think that would create some space for what I want to speak to.
Okay. So fallback is the unconscious acting, thinking, feeling from a space that is more constricted, smaller, less options, less tools, less perspectives than you would normally have access to. And that normally, I think, is a big, I put that in kind of quotes, because I think we talk about normally as if it's the ideal, kind of where we can get to when the birds are chirping and the sun is shining and the breeze is blowing developmentally. But to Shakiyla's point, where we can get to and where we often normally are is a different thing. But we have a capacity. We are able to get into all of the rooms in our developmental house, and then we are triggered into fallback. And in those moments, we can't open those doors that hold the options and the tools and the perspectives and the complexity that we could before. Does that allow you to go into your space, Dana?
We'll see where I'm going for that. When the stories that you tell, Val, about people in fallback for months and years, but I also want to speak to this moment to moment. Can I access my full capacities right now? And so like in this moment, I notice there's this dance between becoming, like wanting to come out, and often that becoming for me is fueled by anxiety. And the more I pay attention, the more subtle it is. So even right now, like I find myself wanting to say wanting to say something, wanting to be seen, and I can feel that, and it's both anxiety fueled eros, but it's also fueled, there's also like a coming back home. I put my hand on my heart. I put my hand on my belly, and breathing and relaxing. And that when I can make that subtle move, my capacities to sense and feel naturally arise. And I feel like that's how I go through my day. Like I'm leaving tomorrow to go to Ireland for the rest of the year, maybe forever. And people went, and I wake up with, you know, for those of you who speak Enneagram, I'll give this away, but I go immediately to planning and checklists. And then it doesn't feel good. And I come back down into the body, and I come back down into just being here. And then time slows down. And, you know, you could say I'm talking in integral theory, I'm talking about shifting state. But there's something about this theme that I'm hearing about being and becoming. And that there's something here that I'm trying to point to that's much more phenomenological, and it's much more relational, and it's much more moment to moment. And I think it's an expression of the theory, without putting the constructs on it.
Mhm.
And I loved what you said, Shakiyla, in our writing about how does this affect our being in the moment, our relating. And there was another word you used, another. And so there's something about, I guess, what I'm stumbling my way into is there's something about really paying attention to our nervous systems, my nervous system and our collective nervous system. That wasn't in the theory when I first, and has been a key to, for me, and also for me to be able to be helpful to others, to open up a space that allows us to access our capacities for whatever reason, or for no reason. So
I just want to say, Dana, that that's what Dana does when we're in conversation with him, and I think what you do with your clients and then all of your offerings to the world, exactly what you just did there. That is not my natural inclination, because mine is this, like, where are we going to? And you are in the, like, where are we right now space. And that tapping in to the heart, to the gut, to the, like, being here now. You're doing that allows me to do that, to not be in the movement, but to be in the being. And I think that's a beautiful gift of the relational space, and just exploring what is here now, not pushing past this to get to that. And I think that's a gift that you offer to yourself, but I think you offer it to all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, and bringing the body in too, you know, this embodiment as being, because so, like, I feel like so often we walk around as disembodied heads, right? And so even hearing you be like, okay, and you often talk about nervous system things, you know, even in your, like, when you're talking about your schedule or something. I remember we were on a call once and you were like, oh, I had all these back-to-back meetings and my nervous system didn't like it, you know? And I was like, right, yeah, like that's a source of information. So it's like you bring in this, remind us about this embodied knowing, which I think the theory, in that sense, I could see why people might think it's mechanistic or missing something, because it's something that it's not juicy enough sometimes, right? Because it's a little too, it doesn't bring in the body. It doesn't, for me, I was also wanting it to talk about the ephemeral a little bit too, because am an energy worker. And so I think a lot about like subtle energies and all of that stuff. And I was like, something is off with that too. So, but like Dana, you kind of are bringing in the ephemeral through the body and like starting there. So I think that's something that is, another way in to it's being, but it also is another way into becoming.
And also bringing in the natural world, which is a whole other conversation that I think is so rich.
Yeah.
What I feel is that now I'm inside of a developmental conversation. Not that I wasn't before, but the invitation, Dana, with what you shared, invites me into a different state. One where I'm tuned into my phenomenological experience. What is it to be me right now? And there's a kind of attunement to myself in relationship to each of you. There's a kind of intimacy here, and it feels like it strips back for me the layers of performance. And it's not like I was performing before. I don't feel that way, but there's a vulnerability here, like a permission to not to play the role of a host, or just to be, or to not, to share what it's like to be me right now inside of this. And that's what I love about this, is that it feels to me where the theory comes alive in a particular way, where it's self-transforming, and I've heard Keegan talk about, well, he has the self-transforming stage, and so and I think that's something, what it brings alive in me is that, when I first came across the theory, I remember it actually was incredible too. It actually took me out of a real, I don't know, I call it a dark night of the soul, because I feel like I had one of those in my more recent years that would blow that one out of the water. But it was a difficult time, and yet what happened quite quickly with myself and my friends was like, we were like, oh yeah, I'm reading about it, but I mean, fuck, how do you actually, like, what is this thing like from the inside out, like, so, and that took us into different practices that maybe you're actually a bit similar to what Dana at least invited me into. So
I welcome you as part of this. I love that you're the host, and I'm boggled. My mind is boggled that you can kind of pull all these threads together and guide us. And I love you just being in the meandering with us, the exploration with us, Joel.
I do too. I mean, and this, by the way, is the eros that I was talking about. The eros and the intimacy, and then what emerges when you're like playing with it,
I think the play is really important here. I mean, I find that as I get older, it's really hard for me to play and to find joy. And that breaks my heart a lot, actually. I mean, I have children, and it's hard for me to play and find joy. And if I'm being honest, some of the reason why it's hard for me to play and find joy is because I have children. So it just is hard. And it's with these people, and in this space of discovery, and not discovery towards something, but discovery in the moment, that I find so much enlivenment and just play, just giddiness, and it's just soul feeding.
Yeah.
And so in a way, like so what I'm mediating right now is like, oh, that's silence, and I jumped in quite quick. There wasn't a lot of space there, but the importance of that space and silence in terms of being and becoming, And what I could feel emerging in me was like, oh, then the almost like the listener, you know, like and how that, is there supposed to be silence, you know, something needs to happen, you know. So again, I'm just like naming this space, you know, what happens when you can step into this kind of emergent type of space. So.
I think that's what Dana was talking about, because I experienced this too, Dana, in my praxis around this, is the spaciousness is scary as hell. Like it is easier to go in with a tool and a framework that you know you're going to apply in this way. And more these days, my practice and praxis is similar to Dana's in that I just use them as liberating structures, and it scares the hell out of me, because it means that like from any given moment you have to be present and relating to what's happening. You know, like you said, you just experience, so you opened up your practice for us in a minute. You just experienced this moment of, oh my God, nobody's saying anything. You know, what do I do in this space? And I find myself in that too, because I'm holding like org development and culture work for my organization. And sometimes it's like we're in chaos and conflict or whatever is happening, and we want a tool or a scenario to explain our experience and fix it. And Dana, you probably get this when people ask you to come into systems sometimes, right? Like they want you to solve their problem, not to like be in there with them, like sensing and feeling into it. It is a scare. It's like this edge moment of being on the precipice of something that's terrifying, you know. So I thank you for bringing that up, Joel, because I do think especially, you know, I imagine you have a lot of practitioners listening to this podcast. And I think so much of our practice is about avoiding that messiness and that not knowing and the kind of like spaciousness of the problems that people bring to us, which really most of them are unsolvable. Let's just be honest. Like, you know, but I mean, there are ways you can work with it. I like you use that language a lot, Dana, like how do you work with this thing? But I mean, people don't like hearing that. I mean, I don't like hearing it because it's a different invitation, you know.
That sparks in me a curiosity of because I think through failure, and it's a question too, you know, of for example, being a coach, you know, and applying certain approaches, structural approaches, and then just kind of feeling like this doesn't really work in the way that it's supposed to work, you know. It's like and how can one support another's development, basically, you know. Is that possible? Like, I do feel it is. It's not like there's nothing we can do, and there's nothing you can do as a coach or a supporter of someone else. That's clearly not true either, you know. But at the same, so yeah, I'm just curious for you all, like how you live with that. I hear you speaking into that a bit, Shakiyla, as well now. Like, yeah.
I'm just
Go ahead.
Go. No, please go, Shak.
No, I was about to say I think that's the inquiry that I'm playing with, like this realization that we actually don't control anything. I think I was talking about, but that we do have impact, right? So we have impact and we have power and we don't control anything. So it's like that's been an interesting thing to live into. Like, what does action or doing look like within those two realities? That's sort of the question that I've been in. And I think the only way you can it's not something you can answer. You really just have to be in the praxis of it, or to like have your hand on your heart and your belly, and like in any given moment, holding those different things. And that's hard for me, because I'm like you, Dana. I like lists, and I like planning things, and I have like plan Bs and plan Cs and all that stuff. So, anyway. But Val, I'm curious, what were you about to say?
I'm just thinking about the role in our capacity to really be with people in their experience without feeling like we have to solve something. So, or answer a question, or ask the perfect question, Joel, as a follow-up, and I appreciate, your role as the host of this podcast and the kind of shepherd of this conversation, and feeling like, okay, what am I supposed to do next? And Shakiyla, and your work guiding, accompanying the development and transformation of the folks in your organization, being in the role with the title that this is what you do, and not knowing that you don't control what comes, and there's stuff beyond our control. And Dana and your accompaniment of folks leading hospital systems and others, who are looking to you to provide the frameworks to, this is how we're going to get you from point A to point B. And I think that what is beautiful in our spaces of exploration, and what I am in the question of and in the practice of trying to bring into other environments where I have a role and expectations are of me, is to be in this kind of space that we often are with each other. Dana and Shakiyla and Joel, we're, welcoming and inviting you into this space where we can just be in the not knowing together, and in the question together, and in the discovery from moment to moment together, without having to impose a framework or a definition or this is what you do next. And how difficult that is as practitioners who are hired to guide folks to be a companion in the mess ourselves. And how do we bring ourselves without imposing ourselves, but bring ourselves as a companion in that space of not knowing, that allows us to come into comfort with the not knowing, better questions, maybe some kind of knowing, but to see what emerges.
Cool. Here, kind of what comes up as we're talking are like the clients I'm working with right now, like today. And there's two edges for me, so I'm speaking as a practitioner right now. And there's two edges. One edge is, I'm going to paraphrase David Cantor's work, is that some of us lead with the language of care or connection. We orient around connection or relationship. Some of us orient around meaning or ideas or frameworks or alignment. Some of us orient around action. So you could say, like, there's these three languages: language of care, connection, action. And we all do all of it, but if I were to describe, I'm probably care, meaning, action, in that order. So I was with a colleague of mine, with a client the other day, and almost all of them lead with the language of action. So meeting that client in their language, in their cadence, in their, in their concerns, and with respect, and rather than my ideas about how to orient, was really beautiful. in a way. It was awkward, but it was beautiful because what happened was after that was fed, there was this intimacy and this softening that happened. And naturally there was this care and connection. And for me, that kind of emergence, that kind of experiment is always it's awe-inspiring to me. And then in this being becoming piece, two teachers of mine, Joel, that you've had on your podcast before, one is Nicholas Yanni, and another people I've worked with, and another Thomas Hubel. And I watch those, like, I'm so moved by both of their capacity to stop what's happening, no matter what the content, and to just bring kindness to the moment. And it isn't the technique in a way, it's the transmission of what's here and being able, like, when I almost want to cry when Thomas talks about, you leave your body, like you're leaving your body, how I go into my head to plan. It was safer as a kid to be able to leave the body. That was really true. It isn't like something I have to overcome, like come back, it's creating this space of compassion to know that the ways that we fall back, the ways that we related to trauma, were wise. And so I almost feel my fathering energy towards that one in myself that dealt with my own trauma, small t trauma, anxiety in the way that I did. And so I was saying, as a liver, for me, one of the things that's alive for me is I sense, and this is a becoming being, I don't know where it all becomes one thing. I sense that quality in both those men, and there's others I could name too. And when I sense that, it has me sit back in my chair rather than lean forward and just trust what's here. So I think there was some connection between those two things, but if there wasn't, I hope it was useful to somebody.
Well, what I like is that just the first thing you said speaks to me of how a theory can create empathy. That you had this client that you met, and they were action oriented first, and the distinction from the theory allowed you, or I don't know if you even thought about the theory actually when you were with them, but maybe at least afterwards it allows you to recognize something that's emerging. And I think that taps into me the importance of projection, noticing my own biases of that I impose onto a person with me, like they should go deep, or something like that. Maybe they don't want to go deep. Maybe they just want to focus or talk about something that's, I don't know if I'd use the word superficial, but, not deep in the way that I propose. And I think, just this thing you just shared is really important for me in my own experience with, this whole theme of space and letting go of control. Do we have agency? The transmission, that actually, if I'm only identified with that part of me that needs to map my experience in a particular way conceptually, and impose certain maps. I know that's going on all the time subliminally anyway, that's kind of like what our brains do. So I'm not talking on that level, but yeah, actually doing that deep work to be able to have that spaciousness and acceptance, the inclusiveness of like whatever's arising, and the subtlety to perceive that and to embrace it. I think that is very potent and almost like a meta skill or something for development unfolding. Dropping any sense of a change agenda that we might have for ourselves, even though there might be, again, like an overarching agenda of like we're unfolding, growing, but recognizing where we are hunting for a problem and trying to fix something, like you said, Dana, that, oh no, there was an intelligence in this thing in me that wanted to go into my head, and honoring that. So for me, those are really, really important things that have helped me with my own, I think, development, actually.
Yeah, I think that the sinking into the what is somehow allows us to be more sure-footed as we move forward. I mean, without intending it to be, just feeling around in the space that is right now allows emergence to occur that is meant to be, not forced.
And I wonder, we're moving towards the end of our time, if there's anything each of you would like to speak into the space, actually, that hasn't been spoken. I would like to invite you to share where we can find out more about your work. But before that, is there anything that hasn't been spoken that you feel called to say?
I mean, just to like think of, because we started off with this thinking about the theory, right? So to go back to it is to just as a reminder that it's a living theory. I mean, as all theories are, right? Like you add things onto them, and then you also figure out how to live from within them and how to try them on. And so, I still really believe in adult development, and I use it in my, it informs my work all the time, more as a gestalt these days than like, it's not prescriptive anyway. So to just remember to hold it as a living theory, and to not let ourselves off the hook from translating it and living into it, right? The theory is just inviting us into something, but it's not doing the work for us.
I think I just want to speak to the courage that it takes to live into the theory outside of the clean lines that have been drawn. And the courage it takes to come into these kinds of conversations in general, I think, and when we are stepping in a role, how much more difficult it is to be in the space of admitting that, okay, my performative side is saying, I need to do this next, or instead of being present to this moment, I am thinking about what is a brilliant thing that I'm going to say next, and just being the courage it takes to be messy and not eloquent, and but to be real, and to live into the realness of all of us, the stumbles back as well as the sprints forward, which are really more like trudging, pulling it along forward too.
Cool. Two things. I've been mucking about in this field, I don't know, 25 years, and I've seen the different evolutions of it. And Joel, I want to really express my appreciation for you holding the space, and I want to describe it as a polarity between the integrity of people developing their models, their expressions, their assessment instruments, the different brands, right? And that there's actually a field that if it can evolve with integrity, can serve the evolution of humanity through a really difficult time. You could say through a time of collapse. You know, what it is that's good about this theory, I think, as Shakiyla was saying, it needs us and the different players in the field to be in relationship in and for you to be able in Coaches Rising to hold the space for the dialectic and the dialogue, I think, is something that we all care about. So I want to express that. And I also want to express I just feel mushy being particularly, and I always crack up of, like, one of the things about Eros, at least how it expresses itself for me, is it always brings out like my mischievous side. Like I want to say something playful and provocative, and I laugh a lot, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that quality here, inside of the spaciousness and the depth. Like there's a lot of room for play and exploration. So this has been a really enjoyable, in the best sense of the word, time together.
Yeah, thank you for allowing us to play together with you, Joel, and for your listeners.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, it's a total pleasure. I really enjoyed myself today with each of you. I just kudos to, you know, my gratitude for each of you showing up and being willing to play in this space. I'm really pleased to be able to share this with people. I feel this conversation will touch people. And I hope these conversations actually do touch people and are part of the evolution that you're describing, Dana, that's needed, I think, you know, and the coming together, the community. So yeah, thank you so much. And I do want to just say, do you want to point people to your work? Because I'm sure people would be interested. You don't have to, but, you know, we've mentioned books and other things. So yeah.
Sure. If you want to learn more about Fallback, I have a new book out called Leaving the Ghost Light Burning, Illuminating Fallback in Embrace of the Fullness of You. So you can check that out. It's on Amazon. My website is ghostlightleadership.com.
And we can link to that in the notes on the
Perfect
podcast page.
Angela, did you want to go?
Dana Carman, integralconsulting.com.
Well, I'm here representing myself today, I will say, but I'm currently at the Fetzer Institute, and our mission is helping build the spiritual foundation for a loving world. And it's where I'm at Fetzer.org, and I love talking to people about complexity and development and how to do that work inside systems with people. So,
and you've done such amazing work.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Well, we'll cut it there, and yeah, so yeah, I'll just stop the recording as well. I know you have to go, everyone.